Hey friends, we've got a special episode today. We're going to talk about, is this form of exercise bad for you? And I have my wife, Leah Wilson, here, and we just got done running our first marathon.
That's right. 26.2.
26.2. Longest before that was just in training was 22. And then, we've never been distance people. And, one of the things that you asked me, babe, was I'm confused. I thought long distance was bad for you. And now all of a sudden you guys, because we had a group of doctors there, you guys are talking about how good this is for you and why it's beneficial.
I thought it was going to be a one-time event. We're going to run one marathon, have some mindset work, growth, mind expansion. And then y'all said, let's do this again next year. And I was like, wait, we're going to do this again? I thought it was bad for your body.
We're sitting there planning not only the next one, but we need to add like 2 more in between just to keep the momentum
Not
going.
marathons, events.
Big events though, like ultra marathons or like running through the mountains of Idaho at
Obstacle races.
9,000 elevation, a 50K. I mean, come on, that's more than a marathon through the mountains of Idaho at 9,000 elevation. You have butterflies in your stomach?
Hiking is more fun though than just pounding pavement.
I would agree with that. But the question you asked is this bad for us? And you've heard me teach and the other Max Living doctors teach for a long time that long, slow intensity raises cortisol levels and increases belly fat and is bad for your hormones. Yes?
Yeah. And it sends, what I understood is it sends signals to your body to break down. Mm-hmm. That if you're not doing short duration, high intensity, that your hormones aren't getting the right signals. If you don't mind, I want to share one little story. One of the things that got me through the marathon, I had the privilege. I mean, it wasn't planned this way, but just so happened that my pacing was on point with 2 other women running the marathon. One of them is one of my best friends, and then one of her friends. And so we told each other stories like the whole time to get us through pounding the pavement. And Sarah Losby lives in this small town where the marathon was held. And so she knew everyone we passed. And she was like, oh, this woman here, this woman here. One of the women we saw lived in this beautiful lakeside home that you had to climb a flight of stairs to get to the front door. Well, she was in her 60s, had diabetes, was losing mobility and could no longer climb the stairs and had to move out of her house. Well, she decided she didn't want to move out of her house, so she started walking 10 minutes a day and reversed every disease process she had, got off of all of her medications and got to stay in her home because she started walking 10 minutes a day.
Wow.
Someone who is on multiple medications and has multiple chronic disease diagnosis and just adding 10 minutes of movement. And now she walks much further than that. She's walking like 5 miles a day now, a few years later. But she was at risk of losing her home and her mobility. Mm-hmm. And just adding movement, and the value of that is absolutely insane.
I love that. Now, so this marathon that we did, it was 4 laps of 6.55 miles. So you'd come around to the same place. So amidst COVID restrictions, and I would say everything became virtual. All the races became virtual, right? And so one of our best friends, Sarah and Mark Losby, they said, okay, so everything went virtual. Let's have our own race, and we'll have it in Columbia, South Carolina, and we'll just create our own routes. And then a bunch of other people joined up, and it ended up being so incredible. What an incredible experience. First time either of us, you and I, have ever run a marathon. Mm-hmm. And it was just, what a fun thing to do. And so because it was a loop, we'd pass each other. So I would see you a lot. Every time I'd see you 3 girls, just chatty Cathys. Like, I'm like, they have energy for days. They still have balance in their steps. You were laughing just like that almost every time that I saw you, and you would cheer me on. It was such like the inspirational component of this. It couldn't have been better circumstances for having 4 hours or 5 hours of just straight like motivation, inspiration. You're passing people who are cheering you on. You get this red wristband when you get to your final lap. And so we're talking about, hey, is that form of exercise necessarily bad for you? Well, for us, it set a goal that we had to train towards in keeping us accountable to movement and doing more than we ever thought we could.
And that's the real value is when you have a training goal, so you carve out a training season, then you're forced to confront things such as how strong are my commitments? You know, how many days do I get up in the morning and my feelings dictate what I do instead of my commitment and things of that nature. It's awesome. Being in a training season is invaluable. And just taking that first step into it is where it's at. It's that first run on that training schedule that says, all right, I'm committed to crossing the finish line of 26.2 miles.
And most people, that's probably going to be setting out a goal to do maybe a 5K.
Absolutely. And that's huge to sign up for and complete a 5K when you're not currently moving at all.
I've had 3 knee surgeries, and the surgeon told me that I was not ever going to be able to run again. So for me, this was like a personal challenge, and also to prove to my body and my joints and my future that, listen, there's not limitations on God's plan for your life. And that just because a man says that you can't doesn't mean that God says you can't. You know, there's nothing impossible when it comes to this. And if you set your mind on something and you go for it, there's just that feeling. I remember crossing the finish line, like at an all-out sprint for me. It's an all-out sprint at the very end. And it was just such an incredible experience to, like, for me, that emotion that was coming out of there and high-fiving everyone and literally breaking the my I don't even know if it was a goal because I didn't think it was possible. But breaking 4 hours for me was just a really big deal because that meant a lot because they told me I would never be able to. And here I am, like, I ran pretty good. That was really good for me.
Yeah. Time to be proud of, for sure. Yeah. It was good.
But going back to the question, is that bad for you? Here's my answer to that. In short, doing that all the time and training like that, yes, would be bad for you.
But not doing it every year?
That's not doing it all the time. You have to incorporate high intensity interval training or cross training in building up of your joints, I would say your muscles, strengthening your joints, allowing the joints to be able to be impacted like that. So the old idea of, hey, training for something like that is bad for you. No, do you know how much mentally, I would say, the mental game that it takes in order to train for something like that, what it does for your psychology to press on, to improve, to work towards something. There's so many benefits to that. And the fact that you have to then be very in tune with your body and become very in tune with your body and also nutritionally. Now, do you do that all the time? The answer to that is no. And I guess the question is,
what is all the time?
What is all the time?
And I don't think that was ever in question. The reason I agreed to do the marathon in the first place was because I clearly understand what it does to your mental game, your psyche, you know, all of those things make your physiology rise in and of itself. However, the pure physiological standpoint was what was in question. And then the question becomes, what is all the time? So if you have a 12-week training cycle in order to get to your marathon, I mean, that's considering you're entering it already somewhat fit, right? I mean, not from ground zero, but your 12-week training cycle of extreme distance running, you do that every single year. Is that considered all the time?
And that's the routine where I would question the all the time thing. So let's say it's a 12-week cycle, using your analogy, 12-week cycle. And then you get done with your 12-week cycle, and then you take, let's say, a month, not a full break, but a month. And then you go back to hardcore training, pounding the pavement, the same type of activity. I would say that's bad. And there's not a like good or bad. It's like you're moving, so you're better than the average American, but are you going to cause detrimental harm to your body and your joints long term? Or hormones? Because if we understand hormonally that long, slow distance raises stress hormones, cortisol has a big impact, negative impact when it's raised over a long period of time, increases belly fat, and also will throw off positive, happy endorphin type hormones, then no, of course you don't want to do that. You don't want to necessarily continuously cycle into that. But cross training, not necessarily pounding pavement, going into more strength, going into more endurance at an incline, changing it up and causing muscle confusion. I think that's the most important thing, is cycling your types of training, and you're not just pounding pavement all the time. And I don't think I think pounding pavement, that form of exercise, is the easiest to do. I would say the no gym required, no even really, I don't want to say technique required, because there's a technique when it comes to running. But yeah, to be able to relax, to be able to have a good foot stride and everything. But it's the most primitive form of exercise that is just innate to man.
We were born to do it. So then I guess the question becomes, so we know that endurance training, you are going to get movement, and movement is what we need. That's what our design needs. So is there such thing as too much movement?
Good question. I really have to think about that one. Is there? Yeah. So, okay, let's take an extreme example. Too much movement. Yeah. Pushing your body to a point where it is literally going into, you're not trained for this level of activity. So there's something called, rhabdomyolysis, where your muscles are just literally wasting away because of how much you're doing. But you have to be a crazy person to get that. You'd have to set your mind on 100 miles and do it that way. And you had this goal in mind and you're just not going to give up. That type of person. And most Americans are in no danger of that.
That's what I was going to say. Let's just say we are not at risk in this country of too much movement.
Yeah, there's very few people who are ultra marathoners who are going to set a goal like that. We are talking to the 0.0001% at that point. And I feel like setting a goal and going after something mentally, physically, and then if you incorporate burst training, that high intensity, short duration, cross training, hormonally, that's what we're talking about. And hormonally, that's where you can get the maximum level of benefit to your body, longevity for the future. And then ultimately you're having something that you're going after and training for. And I think that right there is fitness.
Long-term lifestyle fitness.
Yeah. Long-term lifestyle fitness that you can do forever. So, okay. So I asked you to come on and share that experience, and I appreciate that. That was our recap though of the Cola 655. I'm wearing my hat, represent, and also to say thank you to the Losbys, and thank you to everyone involved who really made that happen, to really have a life experience together and doing life together, which is pretty cool.
Super cool. It was great. Thanks for having me on.
All right, guys. Talk to you soon.